Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk about the Russian economy and specifically the problems that Russia is now facing as a result of shortages in its workforce. Over the last 18 months, Russia has faced a wave of financial sanctions, which has meant that it's lost sales to countries in the West, but it's managed to pick up additional volume of sales to countries such as India and China. So in terms of balancing the books, Russia is a long way away from where it was pre the invasion of Ukraine, but it is still receiving large amounts of income for the sale of those products. But one of the major issues that Russia is going to find very difficult to solve is its lack of personnel. The immediate implication of the invasion of Ukraine, which started on the 24th of February 2022, was that there was a mass exodus of educated people, highly skilled people, and overseas workers who decided that they no longer wanted to be in Russia. And during the first 6 months of the war, it was estimated that around 700,000 people left Russia permanently. And then in September 2022, President Putin announced that he was mobilizing an additional 300,000 troops. And this represented a potential compulsory call-up, a conscription of men of a working age. And that led to another break for the border. And it was estimated that up to 500,000 people left the country to avoid being called up and forced to go to fight in Ukraine. So overall, it's estimated that Russia lost around 1.2 million workers permanently as a result of what's happening in Ukraine. And the loss of those workers is now starting to cause problems in terms of productivity and also inflation. So in today's video, I'll have a look at the population pyramid of Russia and see how it compares to the USA, and I can tell you that they are very different. We'll also look at the official retirement ages in Russia for both men and women, because they are significantly lower than in a lot of other countries, particularly so for women, and that's causing another problem for Russia. We'll have a look at what's happening to wages, because they've increased rapidly, producer prices, because they're also sky high, and inflation. And then finally today I'll wrap up with my summary as to what I think the implications of a shortage in workforce are going to be for Russia and what the impact of this will be on the Russian economy. But before we get started, I'd like to say once again, thank you so much to everybody that's bought me a coffee, sent me a YouTube super thanks, or has joined as a patron or a YouTube member. I really appreciate your support. And in thanks for that, I'd like to offer you the opportunity to win this guy, this little red balloon dog. And if you're interested in winning this, have a look at the video at the end of today's video. This chart is Russia's current population pyramid. And what this shows is how many people there are in each age category in 5-year brackets. So we've got 0 to 4 at the bottom, followed by 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19, all the way up to 100 plus. And the scale across the bottom of this chart are percentages, with 0 being in the middle of the chart. The bars on the left-hand side in blue show the percentage of the population that are male, and the bars on the right-hand side that are red show the percentage of the population that are female. Now, in order to give us some perspective, I thought it was worth comparing Russia's population pyramid with the population pyramid for the USA. And when you put the two alongside each other, you can see that they are very different. The USA's population pyramid is far more rectangular and has a much more even spread, both in terms of the age groups and also the male-female split. And when you look at the Russian pyramid, there are a few things that become evident. Firstly, as shown by the tapering at the bottom of the pyramid, there is a significant reduction in the percentage of people aged between 0 and 29. And this is interesting because it corresponds exactly with the breakup of the Soviet Union, which took place in the early 1990s. And at that time, when Russia moved from being a communist society to more of a capitalist society, a lot of people became very concerned about their futures, and the birth rate dropped significantly. And as a result of that, less children were born, and that's why Russia has significantly less younger people than the USA. The second point to note about the Russian pyramid is that there are fewer males than females, and this is due to a number of factors. Firstly, males have a lower life expectancy than females in Russia, and secondly, Russia have been involved in a number of wars over the last 30 years that have led to significant loss of life, predominantly of males. And the third thing to note about this chart when compared to the USA chart is that the overall life expectancy for Russia is lower. And whilst we're on the topic of life expectancy, I thought it'd be interesting to share this chart with you, which shows the life expectancy of all of the countries in the G20. And as you can see, Russia, with an overall life expectancy of 69 years, has the fourth lowest life expectancy out of all countries. Japan, at close to 84.5 years, has the highest life expectancy of all the countries in the G20, followed by South Korea at 83.5, Australia 83.3, Italy 82.8, Canada 82.6, France 82.3, Germany 80.9, the UK 80.7, China 78.2, Saudi Arabia 76.9, the USA 76.3, Turkey 76, Argentina 75.4, Brazil 72.8, Mexico 70.2, Russia has the fourth lowest life expectancy in the G20 at 69.4, Indonesia 67.6, India 67.2, and South Africa currently has the lowest life expectancy of all of the countries in the G20 at 62.3. And if we now look quickly at the split between male and female, you can see that in Japan, females are currently expected to live for 87.6 years, compared to 85.4 in Australia, 82.8 in the UK, 79.3 in the USA, and in Russia, females are currently expected to live until 74.8 years. And the same data for males shows that in Japan, males are expected to live for 81.5 years, in the UK, 78.7, the USA, 73.5, and in Russia, men are only expected to live for 64.2 years, which is 10 years less than females. And if we go back to the population pyramid for Russia, this highlights a really serious problem, because firstly, there are more females in the population, and secondly, those females are living on average for 10 years longer than men. So as we've just seen, there are more females than males in Russia, and those females on average are living for 10 years longer. And this chart shows the current retirement age of women in the G20. And as you can see, the official retirement age for women in Russia is currently 56.5 years. It's the second lowest of all the countries in the G20. The only country that has a lower rate is China, where it's 55. And I think it's really interesting when you compare that current retirement age of 56.5 in Russia to Japan, which is the third largest economy in the world, where it's 64, and they have an ageing population. In Canada, it's 65. In the United Kingdom, it's 66. In the USA, it's 66.5. And in Australia, it's 67. And if we compare that to the official retirement age for men, you can see that in Russia, it's 61.5, which is 5 years older than the official retirement age for females. And in this day and age of equality, when everybody should have equal rights and be on the same footing, it does seem bizarre that men are forced to retire 5 years later when they also have a 10-year less life expectancy. And as we've just seen, the average life expectancy in Russia for men is 64. So that means that they're only getting around 3.5 years worth of retirement before they're dying. Whereas for women, the life expectancy is 74 and they're retiring at 56.5. Which means that on average in Russia, women are getting 17.5 years of retirement. So the statistics tell us that things aren't quite evenly balanced. And if we compare the official retirement age of 61.5 in Russia with some of the other leading countries in the G20, you can see that Japan's official retirement age for men is currently 64. In Canada, it's 65. In the United Kingdom, it's 66. In the USA, it's 66.5. And in Australia, it's 67. And if we go back to the population chart, an average retirement age of around 5 years lower in Russia means that a whole segment of the population on this chart is retiring earlier in Russia than it is in the other major economies. And that's a problem for Russia because they've now got an ageing population. You can see from the shape of this chart that the biggest age bracket is currently 35 to 39, which means that over the next 20 years, Russia is going to see a significant amount of its population retiring. And that's going to cause major problems because there's going to be a bigger and bigger demand on the state to pay pensions for all of the retired people. And the fact that the official retirement age for women is 56.5 means that Russia already has a large retirement population that it needs to support. And those females, on average, are living for 10 years longer than the males. And therefore, the state will need to support them for 10 years more. This chart shows the unemployment rate in Russia over the last 12 months. And as you can see, there's been a significant reduction. This time 12 months ago, unemployment was running at around 3.9% of the population. However, today it's now sitting at 3%. And if we expand the chart out, 10 years ago, unemployment rates were running at 5.4%. And apart from the brief period during the COVID-19 pandemic, over the last 10 years, unemployment rates have been coming down. And if we expand the chart out further to show the last 25 years, you can see that 25 years ago, unemployment was running at around 13%. However, over the last 25 years, there's been a significant reduction in unemployment. Now, to put the current level of 3% into perspective, this chart shows the unemployment rate in the USA over the last 12 months. And what this chart shows is that in the last year, there's actually been an increase in unemployment rates. 12 months ago, it was running at 3.6% in the USA. Today, it's sitting at 3.9%. And this chart shows unemployment rates in the UK, and it shows a similar pattern to what we've just seen for the USA. This time 12 months ago, unemployment was at 3.7%. Today, it's at 4.2%. So the current level of 3% in Russia is quite a lot lower than it is in the USA and the UK. And you may be thinking, well, surely that's a good thing. If unemployment is low, that means everybody's got a job, so it's good for the economy. But the concern in Russia isn't that there's lots of unemployed people. It's actually that there's a shortage of available workers. So a very low rate of unemployment is actually a negative from Russia's point of view, because it means that there's not a huge amount of people who need jobs. So in terms of expanding the economy and growing GDP, it's going to be difficult if you've got a limited number of people and you can't expand at the rate you want to, because there are simply not enough workers to be able to take up the jobs as companies expand. This chart shows the movement in wages in Russia over the last 12 months. And what this shows is that over the last 6 months, there has been a significant increase in wage growth. This time last year, there was actually a year-on-year fall in wages of 1.4%. At the back end of 2022 and the start of 2023, wages grew at a relatively low rate. However, as shortages in the workforce started to become evident, there was a higher demand for the available employees, and wages started growing at a rapid rate, increasing by 10.4% in April 23, 13.3% in May, 10.5% in June, 9.2% in July, and the latest figures that we have, which are for August, show that year-on-year wages increased by 9.5%. And the problem that large increases in wages causes is that it drives up spending and consumer demand, and ultimately will increase inflation. This chart shows the movement in the official rate of inflation in Russia over the last 12 months. And what this shows is that this time last year, inflation was running at 12%. It remained in double-digit territory through until February. We then saw a remarkable fall to 3.5% in March. It fell further to 2.3% in April. However, over the last 6 months, there has been a consistent increase in inflation, moving to 2.5% in May, 3.3% in June, 4.3% in July, 5.2% in August, 6% in September, and in October it hit 6.7%. And this is now becoming a major concern for the Bank of Russia, because the target rate of inflation in Russia has been set at 4%. So 6.7% is already more than 50% higher than where Russia wants it to be. However, when you look at the trend, there is a clear upward swing here. And unless Russia does something about it, inflation is heading back towards double-digit territory. Now, if you've been following the channel, you'll be aware that over the last few months, Russia has actually doubled its official rate of interest from 7.5% to 15%, and there's a possibility that the Russian central bank will increase rates further over the next few months to try to bring inflation back under wraps. However, as we've seen in today's video, one of the key drivers of inflation is the increase in wages as a result of the fact that there's a shortage of workers, and in any market when you have a shortage of supply, it always pushes up the price, and that's exactly what's happening with wages, and that's feeding into inflation. This chart shows the movement in producer prices, which are also referred to as factory gate prices, so the price of a product when it's leaving a factory, when it's been completed. And this shows a really interesting trend. 12 months ago, producer prices had increased by 0.8%. However, on a year-on-year basis, they actually fell by 1.9% in November, 3.3% in December, 4.6% in January, 7.5% in February, and in March 2023, factory gate prices were down year-on-year by 10.7%. So that meant that companies in Russia were selling their finished goods for almost 11% less in March 2023 than they were in March 2022. However, over the last 6 months, things have changed dramatically. In April, factory gate prices were down 9%. In May, they were down 3.6%. In June, they were completely flat, so the same as they were in June 2022. In July, there was an increase in factory gate prices of 4.1%. In August, factory gate prices were up 10.6%. And in September, which is the last month that we have data for, factory gate prices increased by 16.7%, which is a huge increase and significantly more than the official rate of inflation. And this is one of the reasons why both the Bank of Russia and the Kremlin are very concerned about what's going on, because they can see that the trend in producer prices is a sharp increase, and that will feed directly through into inflation. Because if the price of things that are leaving factories is up by almost 20%, then that means that the prices on the shelves will be increasing proportionately, and that means that there's a real possibility that inflation could quickly move into double-digit territory in Russia. And there are two drivers of that increase in producer prices. Firstly, the increase in wages that we've just talked about, and secondly, the decline in the value of the ruble over the last 12 months, which has meant that any raw materials that companies are having to import have increased significantly in terms of their real cost in rubles. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video to talk to you about the problems that are now being experienced in the workforce in Russia, because this is the supply side of the Russian economy. It's all very well being able to find people to buy your finished products, to be able to sell oil to China and India to replace some of the lost sales that Russia has experienced as a result of the sanctions. But if you don't have the workforce to be able to continue supplying all of your goods, then that is a serious issue, because that's not easy to fix. You can't just wave a magic wand and suddenly get 2 million more workers overnight. And as a result of the negative impact of Russia invading Ukraine, over 1 million people permanently left Russia. They decided they no longer wanted to live in the country. And so Russia saw an overnight reduction in its available workforce. Now, the immediate impact of that wasn't actually that great, because Russia saw a huge reduction in demand for its products. So at the time, it could cope with the 1 million people that had gone because there was a reduction in the level of activity. However, Russia is now trying to ramp things up. It's trying to bring its economy back to where it was before it invaded Ukraine. So it's at the point now where it needs as many people as possible to fill all of the jobs. And as we saw from the unemployment data, unemployment is now down to its lowest level that it's been at any point in the last 25 years. Around 3% of the population is unemployed. And as we saw from the comparable data, that's significantly lower than countries like the USA and the UK. And actually, there's always going to be an element of unemployment. There will be a certain percentage of society that won't have jobs, that are permanently unemployed, basically. So Russia is getting to the point where it's running out of workers. And as we saw from the population pyramid, Russia already had some serious problems that were building up as a result of a number of factors. Firstly, there was a huge drop in the birth rate following the breakup of the Soviet Union, where people were worried about having families. They didn't know what the future held. They were moving away from the communist society, where everybody was looked after, to more of a capitalist society where you're on your own. And the direct impact of that was that people decided to have less children. So Russia has a smaller amount of younger people. So that obviously represents a problem over the next 20 to 30 years as the population continues aging. But in addition to that, Russia also has another major problem, because it has significantly less males than females, as a result partly of the wars that it's been embarking upon, and also there's a high suicide and death rate amongst men. And just to make matters worse, Russia also has a 5-year difference between the official retirement age for women, which is set at 56.5, one of the lowest in the G20, versus men at 61.5, which is also significantly lower than many other countries around the world. So Russia is currently forcing its population to retire relatively young at a time when it's got an aging population and a reducing amount of young people. So all of these factors are really bad news. And as a result of this, wage growth is now sky high. That's feeding through into factory gate prices, which are now into double-digit territory, and that's feeding through into inflation. So Russia is having to increase its interest rates to try to combat what's happening with inflation. But the problem with increasing interest rates is that it generally leads to a slowdown in both investment and spending, both from companies and individuals. So the knock-on implication of increasing interest rates is that Russia is putting the brakes on its own economy at the same time that it's trying to accelerate the growth. And the main reason why Russia finds itself in this position is that it has a shortage of workers. That's the fundamental issue. And that is going to be extremely difficult to solve because Russia currently isn't a country that people want to emigrate to. If the USA found itself in this position, one of the options available to it would be to allow more immigration, let more people into the country, take up all of the excess jobs, and that would provide a quick solution to the population problem. But Russia isn't in that position. Nobody wants to move to Russia at the moment. In fact, it's the opposite. People are looking to leave Russia. So this is a major problem and isn't something that can be solved by additional investment or increasing the amount of weapons that you're producing. This is a major problem that is going to blight the Russian economy over the next 10 to 20 years. So hopefully you found today's video useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end. And remember, if you'd like to win this statue, please check out the video at the end of the next section, which is designed to put a smile on your face. I'm constantly being asked about the statues in the background of my video, and I've got some really exciting news for you. I've decided to give one of these away as a prize. This guy here, who's an electroplated resin statue of a balloon dog, and if you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know that I once posted a video about a balloon dog called Squeaky. Now this is a really fantastic piece, really reflective, quite heavy, and would make a great addition to any home. And you can win this for just £1, which is the equivalent of around $1.30, so really affordable. So rather than buying me a coffee or sending me a YouTube super thanks, why don't you buy a ticket in the raffle that I've set up to win this? Now, to keep things above board, I've got an independent company to take the cash for me and do the draw. So everything will be entirely independent. I won't be picking the winner. It will be all at random. But I will post this to anybody in the world that wins it. There is a possibility that you might need to pay a little bit of import tax, depending on where you live and what the import duties are. But this is your opportunity to win a genuine Joe Bloggs sculpture. So buy yourself a ticket and good luck in the draw.